Welcome back to the Now Morning Show. Our next conversation is with Mwale Henry, who is an executive leadership advisor. And we're talking about from nomination to the nation, the leaders who are vying for your votes. Good morning, Mwale, and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning to you, and good morning to your viewers.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's get straight into the conversation. We just had nomination day, of course, last week, Friday. We're beginning to get a clearer picture of the political space and what's going to be happening. What lessons do you think we can draw from the slate of candidates that have been selected for this year's elections?
Well, this election cycle is definitely an exciting cycle. The EBC has shown it's a very crowded field. You have around 17 parties, 160 candidates. So there is definitely an excitement in the field and a lot of engagement. But for me, when I look at the slate of candidates, I see three big winners coming out of the nomination process on Friday. Number one, the PNM, they were able to have a full slate of 41 candidates going through an historic transition of leadership. That in itself shows a sense of stability within the party going through such a historic change. And the UNC following up being another big winner. They were able to pull together 34 candidates, though they're within an alliance, be it the CUP, the PEP, OWTU, PSA. But one of the key things the political leader would have admitted that the party went through a purging process. So from a leadership perspective, they were able to field their candidates in the battleground areas and in the areas of marginal seats, but leading all the way down to the election, be it the nomination cycle, she was able to consolidate her base in transitioning persons out of what we call strongholds. And then another big winner would have been the Patriotic Front, a new kid to the block, but showing a lot of political maturity, being able to field 37 candidates. So definitely there are key lessons to learn. And I would say from a leadership perspective, and from a momentum perspective, those are my three big winners from the candidate selection process.
Well, let's keep it in conversation with the number three, because even though, of course, we saw more than three parties throw their hats into the ring as per the EBC, we do know that this is, let's say, in some ways, a trend. How significant do you think third parties are going to play in our elections outcome, given what we have seen happen in the past?
Well, good question. There is the possibility of key momentum. So historically, we've seen third parties bringing momentum to the conversation. I think the Patriotic Front would have admitted that she is currently, debating or facing the accusations of how her presence in the field may either split votes, being a disruptor in the space. Truly, we've seen in various political cycles third parties bringing that type of momentum. But what's key that the EBC has brought to the table is that there's a significant youth vote that is coming forward. And with that youth vote, the question is, where would that sway? Where would that youth vote go? And moreover, does this momentum take third-party forces, be it the Patriotic Front, be it the NTA, any of those parties? Would that momentum be enough to bring them into having a seat or even being able to have a say? So, for instance, the TPP in Tobago, that's a contentious space. What will transpire? Would the PDP be able to retain some of their votes, or would the TPP swing into momentum and create a true contest for the PNM that currently holds those two seats?
We've definitely seen a shift when it comes to Tobago in the space itself. How do you think that may influence the upcoming vote in Tobago?
Well, Tobago is going to be a hotly contested space. We are seeing them bringing themselves into the national conversation. For instance, if you look at the Tobago space, you have around 6 parties, 1 independent. We have 8 candidates in Tobago West. We have around 5 candidates in Tobago East. And I think where the competition is going to be happening and a hot contest is going to take place in Tobago East, because Tobago East, the PNM won that seat by around 1,200 votes. So there's going to be a coalescence of focus, a lot of energy that's going to be taking place in Tobago East. The question of vote splitting vis-a-vis. How I look at it from just the political science, what transpires in the Tobago space is a very much local type of politics. And in that local type of politics, one will have to see what those changes are in terms of the communication. The UNC has already, I believe it was in February, would have indicated a willingness to work with the TPP post the election results. That messaging has turned into creating a sense of fear, not just fear amongst the Tobago population who wants a sense of independence and knowing that the parties that are from Tobago will be seeking Tobago's interests. So the key questions that are happening right now in Tobago is the autonomy conversation, having the issue of governance, and thirdly, the sense of continuation. What progress has been made from central government and what can be continued. So Tobago East is going to be a great battleground and a good space for us to focus on what happens moving forward.
Now, as we're speaking now about constituencies, one of the things, of course, that is always focused on every general election are marginal seats. It's a critical point of conversation. You just mentioned, of course, Tobago with seeing some battles, and we do know that this is something we'll be paying keen attention to and probably see for the general election 2025. Based on the current candidates that have been presented in these key constituencies, what historical voting patterns or trends do you think we should expect to see play out? And do you think that we might see some new trends arise for 2025?
Good question. So when it comes to marginal seats, one of the key focuses candidate selection. You know, marginal seats don't necessarily move the same way as other seats or in the national context of an election campaign. So candidate selection is going to play a key role, especially now in a short sprint that this election provides. Having a local connection and local roots is going to have a key play in what transpires. We would have seen that in the Lengua seat in Maruga, whereby Mr. Grantham would have wrestled that seat from the UNC, a traditionally stronghold area, a sitting MP who was once a councillor. So it shows us that local politics and having persons rooted from that community will have a sway in a national environment that is diverse and is contentious. So I'll give you one key example in Tunapuna. Tunapuna, I would say, is a microcosm of Trinidad and Tobago. It's diverse, it's dynamic, it's very decisive. So wherever Tunapuna swings, the nation usually follows. From 2015 to 2020, you would have seen a 3.9% swing from the PNM to the UNC. But Esmond Ford has traditionally been able to hold that seat despite that 7% drop. So the question is, with the introduction of former superintendent, senior superintendent Roger Alexander, would that create a disruption? I would contend that marginal politics really falls on the heels of local connection. So what will be tested is, does his national name recognition have any true impact on local politics? The political science says no, and it's yet to be seen if that will lay hold in Tunapuna.
And Mwale, keeping in line a bit with this conversation particularly, we would like to get your perspective on the youth representation for general election 2025. We've definitely seen a continued rise throughout our political history as well. And this will, of course, be the pinnacle, given it's happening in real time. What is your perspective on it? And do you think that that also may or may not be an influencing factor for our outcome?
Well, the youth vote, it's what we'll call the non-traditional voters. And more importantly, youth vote is where you will find a real swing, because traditional voting patterns around the two dominant parties, you find young persons will not necessarily hold to the traditional patterns of voting. They will be more looking at what are the issues that are being presented, more so what are the policies that are being presented. Major parties have not launched their policy platform or their manifesto their manifestos. So I think that's going to be a key question. What does that manifesto look like? So youth voters will be very more critical in their thinking and not simply based on pattern type voting. The Patriotic Front has made it a public declaration that they are going after youth votes and new voters. So let's see what rolls out in the manifesto platform and which party has a superior vision, stays to the issues, and most youths aren't engaged in the mudslinging per se or the tribal conversation of voting. So whichever party brings that clear message, I think that party is going to be able to either retain the youth base that they have and also attract the new voters that are coming into the political field.
No, and Mwale, speaking about main messages and manifestos, these, of course, many times will come from what are perceived to be some of the main issues facing the country. From what you've observed so far in your research, what do you think is likely to dominate the national conversation as we get ready to go to the polls?
Well, some of the major issues would drive the conversation in this election cycle would be the economy, it would be crime. Those would be the two hot button issues. Because of the geopolitical space that we are in, one of the key issues that will enter would be about leadership and the competency of leadership. So once voters begin to mull through those two areas and those three key core areas that will influence their voting behavior, they will be keenly comparing, because this will be an exercise of comparison. Who do we see as a competent leader? Who do we see as that next generation leader? And more so, who is equipped to solve some of these historical challenges? The issue of crime hasn't just been a challenge of this administration, but many administrations. The issue of the economy has been a challenge for various administrations. So the issue of management and leadership is going to be a key component in this election cycle. And whoever is elected would be based on superior leadership. This person has the competency to do it, or the team to assist